how did you get to a place where you were able to get treatment?
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I grew up on a farm, which was an incredible experience for me because it allowed me the chance to connect with animals and be in nature. And we didn't have neighbors nearby, or so I always sort of isolated. And I was very close to my one brother, who's 2 years younger than I, and he and I experienced some trauma together. Yeah, we were molested when, I think it started about when I was 5, and it went on until I was about 12. And with him it wasn't as long, and he doesn't remember it, thankfully. And that, we grew up in my parents stayed together until I was 15, but it was a very very tense home situation. My father had, I believe, has undiagnosed mental health challenges, and he, and the reason I believe that is because he had a lot of the same issues that I've had and more, and he was very angry a lot of the time, and could be very violent as well. We were scared. Our home was very strict. We weren't, children were to be seen and not heard, and if you talked or did anything that you weren't supposed to do, then you would get hit, and yeah, we had the belt or a willow that you got to go down to the river and peel and prepare for yourself. So yeah, growing up, my brother and I spent really a lot of time in the bush hiding and building forts and just trying to be quiet together, because my brother was kind of like Roger, and he was always in trouble, and he was a tiny little guy compared to me, even though he was 2 years younger, and my dad always seemed to find fault in him, and it was very upsetting because I was my dad's favorite, and my dad always he didn't hit me as often as he hit other people, and my mother was afraid to leave because she had 4 children and she didn't think that she could make it on her own. So she stayed and stayed and stayed to the point where she was afraid that one of us would die, and so she finally did leave. And when we did leave, I stayed with him for a time, but he became extremely ill and mentally ill, and things happened that, anyway, I went to live with my mother, and we lived in town for a year, and then my dad showed up and threatened to shoot my mother, and so we just left town, and we drove until we found a place to settle. My sister was 17, and she chose to stay up in the Yukon and finish her schooling. So she never lived with us again after that, and she had been on her own for a little bit prior to that anyway. And then because she just living at home was just too much for her, and she was a lot stronger personality, and she knew that would be better for her. And anyway, we ended up moving to the Comox Valley in BC, and I lived there with my mother and my stepfather and my youngest brother, and my brother that I was closest to in age. He lived with us for a time, but nobody could handle him because he was traumatized and he acted out, and so he got shipped back and forth between my mom and my dad, and then he ended up moving in with a friend at a young age, a friend's family, and then he moved out on his own, and he settled in Duncan, and he's been there ever since he was, I think, about 13. And so really when we moved to the Comox Valley, basically our whole family was separated. That was really difficult.